The Washington Post's Robert Kagan recently published an essay called "Our Constitutional Crisis is Already Here." Kagan argues that America is set up for the greatest political and constitutional crisis since the Civil War. We often talk about red America and blue America, but the idea of two actual Americas seems beyond the pale. To actually carry out this idea of two Americas, firstly, would pose incredible difficulties. Even in the secession of 1860 and 1861, there were states connected to each other. However, today, blue states are not connected. By and large, red America is fairly connected, perhaps except for Alaska. Never-Trumper David French, formerly at National Review, fancies himself as more of a healer, more of a peacemaker. He recently wrote that many Americans are in agreement on issues. He even promotes his book in his article. It's called "Divided We Fall" and came out a year ago. And in it, he presents a simple argument that America's strongest social, political, and cultural forces were driving America apart, and that if we did not arrest the trend and address the culture of grievance that animates our politics, the future unity of the nation could not be guaranteed, he says. He believes most Americans actually do agree on issues, and it's just social media that polarizes people. He writes, quote, "The combination of malice and misinformation is driving American polarization to a fever pitch." While social media has its own set of problems, I agree. I disagree with the idea that there isn't a huge divide between left and right. The reality is there is a massive divide. And while social media may add insult to injury and be a bit more spicy than a face-to-face conversation might be, how polarized, one might say, people are on social media is also a symptom of how people truly feel. That is, if you haven't been banned from social media. The divide is real. Some say that Donald Trump is what caused the divide, but that's simply not true. Obama was one of the left's most radical presidents, so naturally, there was pushback against that and the pendulum swung the other way. One might argue that political figures like AOC are perhaps making more on the left move left. I'm not sure, but maybe. But let's look back. Wait, she was elected in the first place and rose to prominence because of radical leftists who supported her and put her there to begin with. The ideas produced her, not the other way around. If the radical left wasn't already a contingency, she would not have been elected or been able to win her primary against a left-wing but more moderate Democrat Joseph Crowley. AOC rose up through the ranks by working for progressive Bernie Sanders. She paints herself as more of a waitress, but the reality is she was seasoned politically, particularly in political organizing, and knew what she needed to do to win. So these things don't just happen out of nowhere. Let's remember that. And similarly, with someone like Lauren Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene, they rose to prominence because groups like Bikers for Trump and others supported them, and they represent the ideas of the people who vote for them too. Let's look at this recent study from University of Virginia. Project Homefire, in conjunction with Innovate MR, a market research firm, conducted this study, including thousands of voters, half of whom voted for Trump and half who voted for Biden. 80% of Biden voters and 84% of Trump voters agreed with the statement that elected officials in the opposing party present, quote, "a clear and present danger to American democracy." Honestly, this is not surprising. I wasn't polled, but I believe this to be true as well. Polling found that 56% of Biden voters agreed with the statement, quote, "There's no real difference between Republicans and fascists," while 75% of Trump voters agreed with the same statement about Democrats and socialists.